Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tami Patzer, and I'm excited because I have a returning guest today, David Adelson. He is a lifelong healer, author, meditation teacher, artist, and inventor. David Adelson has spent decades studying quantum physics, consciousness, and unified field theory, developing more than 500 easy-to-use enhancers to reduce stress and increase success and joy in life. His dynamic approach has helped countless clients and followers around the world achieve more happiness, abundance, peace, and connection. And I'll just say right now, I went and I got the Peace and Harmony download at peaceandharmonydownload.com. And I've been playing that in the background on my computer for maybe a week or 2 weeks. And I have noticed a significant improvement in terms of peace and harmony in my life and surrounding my life. It's like I'm attracting peace and harmony. So I'll just say, thank you, David. I really appreciate that. And I am using it regularly. So thank you. Today, we're going to kind of take a look at Newtonian physics and quantum unified field physics. And again, I'm no expert, but you are. So I'm going to let you start us off on explaining exactly what we're talking about today.
Okay. Well, you know how much I enjoy talking with you. So thank you so much for having me back. I do want to remind your audience, the peaceandharmonydownload.com, that's free. So everybody should take advantage of it. Our goal is to get it around the world because exactly what you talked about, people have fewer family squabbles. In businesses, they have, fewer customer complaints. And our goal is, if you have a business with 50 people, play it on all their computers. It'll make a huge difference for you and for the world. And we have a vision of a very bright world with lots of harmony and peace and everybody being taken care of, which is why I'm so excited about the changes that are taking place collectively in the world, not just from the level of understanding, but actually there seems to be some very real shift in the way things work. And that's where we want to talk about this Newtonian physics versus quantum physics, unified field physics. So as you'll remember, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, but we want to go into more detail with it now. Newtonian physics was based, the story of the apple falling from the tree and hitting Newton, whether that's true or not true. The whole point is that something in the world happened. He saw its effect, and from that, he started putting together this whole idea of relationships, of relativity, Einstein was more about relativity, but this idea that the causal relationship between things. And traditionally, we know, Lord Christ said, as you sow, so shall you reap. All the different traditions in the world talk about what you do comes back to you. Karma from the East is all about action and reaction. So this idea that everything is causally connected. Something happens, and then because that happened, the volcano blows up, and then because the volcano blows up, all these other ramifications, the island appears out of nowhere. And if you've ever seen some of those videos on YouTube where literally watching an island getting created, it's pretty awesome, So, but something happens. A volcano blows up, the island is created, or the trees burn, or whatever. We say something to somebody, and based on what we say and their interpretation of it, something else happens. So one of the things that we want to be aware of is just how when we interact with things, everything seems to come back to us. Maybe we inadvertently cut off somebody on the way to the grocery store. We don't see them. They're in a blind spot. It's totally unintentional, but then we run into them in the store and they know who we are. We haven't seen them before, and suddenly there's somebody who's rude or abrupt or whatever to us, and we created that based on this understanding of Newtonian physics. We did something that created that karma or whatever you want to call it, and then we're having it come back to us. We cut somebody off, they felt slighted, again, their interpretation. So we have this whole thing of interacting between things all on the physical level. Third law of motion, second, third, whatever it is, a body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So basically it says, if you throw something hard enough, it's going to go forever unless something else acts upon it. And then the first thing that acts upon it is gravity and friction in the air and all of that. But if you do it in space, the idea is until it hits something, there's no friction there. So this whole idea that we do something and then because we do something or something gets done, something else will happen. That's all about what Newtonian physics is about. And how that's interpreted in our lives is that if we want to get a house, for instance, get a car, we don't think, oh, I should go for the car, I should go for the house. We think, what is it that I need to do? What are the steps that I need to take to have this as the outcome? What's the action? What is the X that when I do it, I'll get the result of Y? Does all that make sense?
Yes. So basically, if I do X, I will eventually get to Y, such as if I save money for a down payment, I will have enough money to apply to get a loan to get a house. And if I do all that, eventually I'll get a house.
Exactly. So we have this whole thing, and it's worked very well for us. We have rocket ships that can make it to the moon, or payloads into space, or space shuttles, or we have trains, we have transportation. We can now grow crops in the U.S., or I think it's chickens or something that they grow in the U.S., they ship it to China, it's processed in China, and they ship it back, and it's still only a couple bucks in the grocery store because it's cheaper to do this. So this whole thing has helped us a lot. We can build tall buildings. We understand about gravity and how much structure and how much the steel can hold, and we can build bridges, and we can also destroy bridges or take down buildings in a very small area because we understand all of these things. So it's been hugely useful to us, but it's also been limiting, because what happens is now we start, instead of focusing on what we want, we spend a lot of time focusing on how to get there. So when I was in college, I took fencing lessons because pirates, cool, Peter Pan, whatever it was. It was going to be fun. And so with one of my good friends, we did that. And the whole goal of fencing, first of all, is not to kill anybody. It's the sport. It's like soccer, get points. So the main way that you get points is you have your sword, or it's called the foil. That's a particular kind. There's other kinds. And they're rigged with a flat tip that when you press against it, it sends an electric current down through the sword, through your wrist, and a beeper goes off. So you get points when you tap your opponent. You get the most points if you tap their heart, because the idea is, it does come from sword fighting, where the idea was to kill your opponent. It's just now it's a sport. So your goal when you're going fencing is to try to hit the other guy in the heart. And his goal is to try to hit you in the heart, but both of you know it, so you both do things to make sure that doesn't happen. So one of the things you do is you stand sideways instead of facing somebody straight on. And then you hold your sword in a particular way down around your navel, where you can just do a slight twist of the wrist. And if their sword is coming to you, you just move your hand just a little bit. You don't have to move your whole arm. You just twist your wrist a little bit, and their sword will hit your sword and slide off and go right by you. So if they're coming at you, you're going to do this little thing with your wrist. Now, they know you're going to do that because this is not their first time. And so they've been practicing. And the actual exercise is you stand in front of a doorknob and you just twirl the tip of your sword around a doorknob, which is just like a wrist. And all you want to do is when he starts to push your sword to the side is you just drop down under his wrist and come up the other side and keep coming forward. So the scene is that you're trying to tap the other guy in the chest. He's going to block you. You have to wrap your sword around his wrist and keep going towards him. The reason we're explaining this is that we get caught up in the process and forget the goal again and again and again and again. And that's exactly what happened to me when I was doing a 10-minute exercise with my coach, and he was trying to teach me the wrist thing, how to get around. I was going to lunge towards him. He was going to block me. I was going to drop my sword down around his wrist as tight as possible and keep coming up. And I was getting really good at it. But 5 times during this 10-minute thing, he just threw his arms back up in the air, stuck his chest out full frontal to me, and he was a very broad-chested man, and just stood there. And every single time, instead of going for what the goal was, which was to tap him in the chest, every single time I had gotten so caught up in wrapping around the wrist that I followed his wrist way up into the air to the side of his head, instead of doing what I was supposed to do. Instead of going for the goal, I got caught up in the process. And this is the danger of Newtonian physics of causality at a time where quantum physics is starting to become a practical and functional reality in the world. Because Newtonian physics says X has to happen before you get to Y. But we often get caught up in X. So how many times have we gone to the store, to the grocery store, to pick up an item, instead picked up 10 or 15 different items and come home without the item we went for?
I'm guilty of that. It's like I'm going to the store to buy coffee. I get to the store, the cart ends up being completely filled. I get home, no coffee.
Yeah. So many times I'm just going to grab one item, I'll bring one bag to the grocery store, and I buy 2 more bags to come out. I mean, here in California, they don't do recycling anymore, so you have to buy a paper bag for 10 cents or something. Maybe it's just LA, whatever it is. But anyway, so you go and then you just get distracted. And this is the whole... I don't know if we want to use the term problem, but it's the whole limiting aspect of Newtonian physics is that we get distracted in the process, just as I did in the sword play thing, that even when the goal is presented, we don't grab it. We don't take advantage of it. We still think, oh, I need to work 3 more weeks. I need to get 2 more paychecks. I need to do X more before I can receive what I've been working for. And I know you're very aware, Tami, of that, those limiting beliefs that stop us from getting what we want, even if it's being presented. We just, as if, don't see it. Maybe we literally don't see it, or we don't realize that it's for us. We think it's for somebody else. We're not always willing to accept the rewards that we worked hard for because we feel we haven't done enough X. Therefore, we can't have the Y, and we're blocking ourselves. Okay.
That actually happened to me with my roof. I had a leaky roof, and I kept thinking that I had to earn the amount of money to get the roof done. And it's a big house, so it was like $20,000. And I kept thinking that I had to earn $20,000 in cash to get the roof done. And so, of course, I'd start to make the money and I'd get close, but then something would happen. And of course, my money would disappear, and then I'd start over again. And then at some point, I don't really know what happened, but at some point I said, wait a second, I don't have to have the entire $20,000 at one time. Go find out how to work with the roofer and see what they would do. And it turned out that I was able to get my roof, and I didn't have to have $20,000 up front. But it took me, I hate to admit it, but it took me a few years to figure this out, because I kept thinking that I had to do it in a certain way, even though all of these opportunities would present themselves. Like you said, I was not seeing anything until it got to a certain point. And then it was like, oh, that was easy. Yet it took me several years to get this roof replaced that I needed desperately.
Yeah. So just like that, we get distracted by the process. We get distracted when we go to the grocery store. And they've designed the grocery store to distract us. And not in a mean way, but just in a way that, oh, people like this. We'll put this where they'll see it. Truthfully, that's what I do in my office, in my bedroom. The things that I want to put my attention on, I put out so that I see them, so that I can appreciate them. The flowers or the art or whatever that I put out, or the books or the quotes or the little gifts or whatever it is, I put it out so that because I want it. And the grocery stores are the same way. We know you like these things, therefore we're going to put them out and let you take advantage of it. And kind of creation is the same way, is in that it's here for us to enjoy all the various aspects of it, but then we also have a spiritual component that we want to not get lost in the everyday things. I don't want to go into that in a lot of detail right now. What I do want to get into is this shift that's taking place from Newtonian to quantum physics, quantum and unified field. They're very close. They're different enough, but there are some similarities. And it's a shift that's kind of happening simultaneously. So one of the most fascinating things about quantum physics is that things happen in a completely different way. It's not Newtonian physics. So I don't know how many of your audience saw the Avengers movies recently with Infinity Wars and Endgame, but there's a situation that happens where Ant-Man shrinks down to the quantum realm, gets lost there for some... this might be a spoiler alert for somebody who saw Infinity Wars and not Endgame, so I'm just going to warn them. Something happens that he gets locked into the quantum realm for 5 years of our time, but he only experiences it 5 hours. The whole thing is very different. And the only reason I bring it up is just this idea that, the wind goes across the surface of the water and it has an effect, but we go 10 feet below the water, it's a completely different, as if laws of nature are functioning. So what you can do on the surface with you get a sailboat, you sail across the surface of the water. If you take that sailboat and drop it 10 feet under the surface of the water, you have very different experiences. It's water currents and not wind currents. You drown because you can't breathe. There's a bunch of things that happen. So in the quantum realm, one of the exciting things is that from our limited perspective, things happen for no reason. And things happen in a completely unrelated way. In Newtonian physics, if I tickle over here, it's going to laugh over here. In quantum physics, if I tickle over, I'm in unified field, if I tickle over here, it could laugh on Mars. It could laugh thousands of miles away. It could laugh at some point in time in the past or the future, and not necessarily simultaneously. There are all kinds of really interesting things that happen, including the belief that the speed of light is the fastest thing, and that therefore that events can't be related that are farther away than the speed of light could travel. First of all, it's naive to think that the speed of light is the fastest thing that there is, but it's the fastest thing that they've measured, 186,000 miles per second. And what they have believed is that if an event happens in Tulsa, that only things that are closer than the speed of light could travel can be affected by what happens in Tulsa. but they've just found, I don't remember the exact term of that, but it's kind of like twin stars that are in completely different galaxies. There's some kind of pulsar, some kind of something stars that they have found that when something happens to one of them, it happens to the other one, and they're literally galaxies apart, and it's instantaneous. So they suddenly are now saying, well, how can this be? How can it be that something that's way farther away than the speed of light would take years, if not decades, to get between them, and yet they're responding to what's happening on the other one? One affects the other one affects it back, so we're starting to see that things can be affected in a way where space and time doesn't have relevance. That, again, one of the things that I just said is you can tickle unboundedness over on the right, and it laughs in the past, in the future, in the present, but far away. So this idea that so what happens is we don't know of the relationships that happen in the quantum realm. Things happen apparently independently. So for no reason, a photon can pop into existence. A neutron, electron can pop into existence in the quantum realm. From our perspective, which is admitted limited human perspective, for no reason whatsoever. It can then travel backwards in time, and then it can split up. So one of the things that, Feynman talked about and some of these other people talked about back in the 70s is once you start to understand this, the whole universe could simply be one photon moving backwards and forwards in time and coming into and out of existence, and it's painting the whole canvas of the entire creation. That one photon is doing this. In the quantum realm, that becomes a possibility. Now, the practical application of all of this very abstract stuff is we don't have to do X to get to Y anymore. If from the quantum realm something can just pop up, we can just fix our roof. We don't have to go through the process of figuring out how to get the money. We don't have to, just as your experience was, Tami, you don't have to go through the way that you think you used to. We don't have to do it the way we used to do it. And not only that, the new ways of doing it are far more effective. So in Newtonian physics, if we walk into a dark room, we have to find something that's causing the darkness, and we have to find the darkness. We have to find the source of the darkness. Is it coming out of this hole? Is it coming from this corner? Where do we find the darkness? And then we have to deal with the darkness and remove the darkness to get rid of it so that we could have light in the room. And in this analogy, that's Newtonian physics. We have to find the cause of the darkness. But in quantum physics, we just flip the light switch and the light comes on. We don't have to deal with it at all. We don't have to get rid of the darkness to have light. We just introduce the photon comes into existence for no reason. We just flip the light switch. Does this make sense?
Well, it's pretty deep. It does make sense, but I'm thinking to myself that this is all new information for me. And I imagine it is for some of our listeners, and then some of our listeners probably are well versed on this. But it's fascinating to me to think about how limited we are in our perceptions of what is and how we see things. Just like me thinking, and the only way to get a new roof is I have to work hard and get money to do it. But that may not even really be the case, but that's how I perceived it. And that it's just like what you were talking about in another conversation about our being able to manifest things. But I like the concept of being able to just literally flip a switch and we're able to change things.
Yes, to solve the problems. And that's what's exciting. Yes, a lot of the stuff that we went through is very abstract, but the benefit of that is the practical application, which is, and I'm just going to say it very concisely, I want what I want and I get it. I want what I want and I get it. I don't have to want what I want and figure out a plan and go through all the steps. I just want what I want and I get it. And little kids get this. Little kids get things all the time. You know, when my son was 2 or 3, we went into some store, and right past the checkout, when we went in, there was this big display of stuffed kittens. And especially big for him, it's this big thing that took the end of an aisle and a couple things. And as soon as he saw them, he just walked up to them. He picked up one, he put it back, he picked up a second, he put it back, he picked up the third, he put it under his arm, and it stayed there for 2 years. And when we went to leave, he didn't even know to ask for it. He didn't have any concept of money or paying for it. So he went through, and I just paid the cat person. I said, he got one of those, and she rang it up. And he went out to the car completely oblivious to it. And he carried it with him wherever he went for a couple years. But he just saw something and he wanted it, and not in a mean, or he just saw the world just presented something to him and he thought, oh, that's for me, and allowed himself to receive it. And then we learn what goes on in the world. We learn about money, and we learn about all of these steps that one needs to take, of even asking people for, is it okay if I sit here? We needing to get the money to buy the kitten, needing to do whatever. And what we are in a wonderful stage of now is learning to undo a lot of the processes so that we can have what we want more immediately. So, and a perfect example is Amazon. So you go to the grocery store to get coffee, and then you forget to get coffee. But now these days, and I'm not going to get into the socioeconomic pluses and minuses, but I'm just saying now these days you can pick up your phone, you can click a couple buttons, and you can have coffee at your house the next morning with no distractions. You just you want what you want and you get it. And my belief is that this is not going to go away, but the problems associated with it will. So we look at, for instance, there's a lot of people who are very negative on 5G. They feel that there's some damaging vibes about it. There are some people who look at transformers and they say, well, in the area near where these big transformer things are, a lot of children come up with a lot more diseases than they do in other places. But we have these electric wires, these high-tension wires that go back and forth across the country. And maybe there's something in the energy coming from them that's not completely life-supporting and does cause some damage. There was, some somewhat famous study in Europe, Finland, I can't remember where it was, where some 5th grader got her Wi-Fi connection and put some plants right next to it, and the plants that were near the Wi-Fi died and the other ones in a different room didn't. And they were like, oh my God, this is horrible. And maybe it is. But here's the thing. With the right technology, we can switch it from being negative to positive. And now we have this infrastructure of electric wires going back and forth across the country, in some places through completely desert areas where there's nothing. And when we find that frequency that changes it from being damaging to 100% supportive of natural law, we can literally change deserts into oases virtually overnight. Suddenly things will grow, their water will be held, plants can grow. Suddenly those things like Wi-Fi or 5G or whatever it is that have been having a bad effect can now have a fully nourishing effect. And it's just, this is what we mean by light switch technology. It's just a little thing that just tweaks the vibration from something that's annoying to a lovely purr. So we've in our car, we get in the car and the engine has a rattle. And we're uncomfortable with the rattle. And then the guy gets in there and he does something, and suddenly we have the nice purr again, and we settle down. You with me?
Yeah, I think I get that, because we're in this, I guess, in a state of disruption right now when there's all of these things that are changing, and so many people talk about everything as being negative, negative, negative. But one of the things that I like about you, and whenever you have a conversation, you always come back and say, well, good things are happening in the world. And I think that's the part, again, we're at that stage of, because we're humans, we don't always understand what all this stuff is and what is really happening. And so that's why I like talking to you, because at least, you can try to explain some of these higher level concepts to people so that they can understand them at a lower, an elementary level or a lower level. So, we don't have to have a PhD to understand what you're talking about, that there can be some good coming out of all of this.
Yeah, and the fun thing is you don't need to understand it at all, but again, it's the practical application, the understanding that which appears to be negative. And we were actually talking about this just before the show, where you were saying some things that people have that they can be upset by or they feel is a negative thing can in fact be something that leads to something positive. So on one hand, we feel, so World War II is an example that everybody looks at, oh, how horrible it was. And it was horrible. There were aspects of it that were, I don't even want to get into it. But we're talking far away from each other. There's a video aspect to this. You and I can see each other. For the people in the podcast, they're going to be listening to this conversation. That technology at the level that it's available today would not be available had we not had that problem, that situation in the world. So much good has come out in the form of medicine, especially in the form of communication. We all have, most of us have phones that we can carry in our purse or in our pocket or in our hand that have more computing power than they used to get the rocket to the moon in 1969. Way more computing power than that ever had. And we have these things because of the advancements and the focus that happened in the terms of creative energy and how to make things effective and make them in a cost-effective way that made them do what they wanted, that happened during World War II, and then the rebuilding that happened afterwards. So we live a level of luxury and a level of comfort in the world right now that is unheard of in the past, and it happened because of this horrible thing. So many times, it's the bad thing that gives rise to the invention that, oh my God, we need this. If we don't want hurricanes anymore, we have to not want them, and then we can create a technology whereby that can take place. And we've actually, the piece that we talked about, the Peace and Harmony program before, we have bigger and bigger and bigger units of them. And one of the things that we want to do is get them around the world, because we feel a lot of the natural disasters and a lot of the effects and the benefits of these new technologies can take place if we get enough of these devices in the world and we take advantage of this technology and what this means. So I know you and I are both a little tight for time, but I want to tell you this one story, if I may, of what happened in, I think it was 1978 or 79 in Los Angeles. So some of the work that I have done is something that came from things that I experienced as a meditation teacher and going to Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, where I studied physics and quantum mechanics and writing and all these other things, math, biology, all the normal stuff. But there's an advanced, many people have heard of the TM program, which is a great meditation technique. There are many good ones out. It's the one that I fortunately found when I was fencing back in college. And there's some advanced techniques for that are available, a more developmental program to just get more mind-body coordination and mind connected to the unified field, to source, to whatever we want, the big capital S self, whatever Lord Christ called it, the kingdom of heaven within. So there's these techniques, and they had done some research that found when they got large groups of people together that it did affect things like the weather and the economy and the number of accidents that would happen. There was actually a study in Israel done in the mid-70s where they had a group in Israel, and they got so good at they could predict the number of war deaths that would happen based on how many people made it to the group practicing this. And it was such a good study that study itself became, in England, that was used as an example of how to make a good study in a course that taught how to do PhD level research. So so what happened in 78 in LA is that at this point, Los Angeles, smog was a very real deal. On every weather report, they always gave you the smog report for people who had problems with allergies or whatever, asthma, that these are days you can't go out. And it was very regular. There would be weeks at a time where you couldn't go out and stuff. And they had this meeting on a Sunday afternoon in Pacific Palisades, and they had hundreds of people come and all do their meditation and their advanced program together. And then they had this big celebratory meeting, and some announcement were made, and it was fun. But it was the first of its kind. And according to how things come into coherence, and I don't want to go into it right now, but it turns out that if the square root of 1% of a solution goes into coherence, the solution all goes into coherence. It happens for there's metals. It's the things that happens with a current, electrical current, when you get a certain percentage of the metal to go, the square root of 1% of the atoms in the metal ring to become coherent, suddenly the whole thing shifts into coherence, and you can run an electric current indefinitely. Fluids become superfluids, which have all kinds of qualities. We won't go into all of these right now. But the idea is that there's a very big and dramatic shift, and it's based on the square root of 1% of a given population, the number of atoms, the number of electrons, in the case of LA, the number of people. And the key number in LA was 140 something, but 240 some odd people showed up at that event, and they met and they had a great time, and things went well, and nobody thought much about it, and everybody went home, and nothing happened. No rain, no storms, beautiful night, just like other nights had been. But the next day, the U.S. Weather Bureau came out and said, all the laws of nature are in perfect harmony. The air has never been clearer in the history of LA. So, and I was walking home from work in the middle of the afternoon with some friends, and they were giddy. And one of them was just saying, I can't stop laughing. I don't know what's going on. And I said, it's oxygen. You can breathe. And she was like, oh my God. Now, the reason that I find this story exciting is it's taking advantage of these quantum mechanical principles of how they work, of unified field principles, and it's flipping a light switch. Nobody addressed the smog. At the same time, I saw a newspaper article where, because smog was so bad, Mexico City, and I saw a drawing of this, were seriously considering putting huge fans around the mountains with blades that were a mile long to blow the smog somewhere else. That's a Newtonian solution to the problem. But now here we have another solution where the smog completely dissipated without addressing the smog at all, but by this quantum field effect, unified field-based effect. And so a lot of the programs that I've created are modeled after that. The Peace and Harmony program was like, wait, if we can do that, what can I do? What can I create that will have a similar effect? And that's how we created the Peace and Harmony program and its bigger cousins, if you will.
Wow, I could listen to you all day. And everyone, make sure you go get the free download, Peace and Harmony download.com. And like I said, I downloaded it. I've been playing it in the background. It's silent, so you don't know it's playing in the background. But something happens that makes you have peace and harmony. And it's, again, I'm just my own personal experience. It's something happens internally, but also externally. I've been doing a lot of speaking, and again, I've been asked to speak twice impromptu, and both times what came out of me was exactly what the audience, I guess, needed to hear. And it was funny because I wasn't consciously thinking about peace and harmony, but out of my mouth, I did talk about peace and harmony. So that's how I know that it's affecting me, because I'm using language that I might not normally use. So I really appreciate that, David. And I really do want everyone to go to peaceandharmonydownload.com, because it's beautiful. It's free. You just push the button. It's a video, plays in the background. And I think it's like 3.5 hours of continuous play. So you don't really have to pay attention.
So, yeah, and thank you for that. And I appreciate that, because we do feel that a lot, just based on this example of clearing of more peace and harmony in your life and the lives of other people who have used this program, of clearing the smog in LA, that we start to see that utilizing these quantum level programs, these quantum level tools, we can literally want world peace, want prosperity for everyone, want health for everyone, and suddenly they become plausible. It becomes possible to recognize that very quickly someone is going to find that switch that's going to change the transformers and the high tension wires to be completely nourishing, to that plants and people and babies will flourish near the Wi-Fi towers or the cell towers or whatever, and they're going to see that. It's literally going to become, oasis gardens, excuse me, and it's very exciting when you think about the possibilities of what this world can become very quickly, when all you have to do is flip a light switch, and you don't have to do X to get to Y. X to get to Y is we clean up the trash in the oceans by going around and picking up every piece of trash. No, why don't we develop a technology that just changes the trash into organic material that nourishes everything? And these technologies, I firmly believe, are right around the corner. I think we're going to have a very exciting world very quickly. Very quickly, things are going to be amazing. So,
well, like, again, talking to you, it really does bring a lot of hope to the world. And so often people are all full of the gloom and the doom, but I'm really happy to talk to you, because it's like peace and harmony, and you bring that hope and that light that, think about it, with the flip of a switch, everything, the pollution, the worries, the smog can actually be changed. And like you said, desert into oasis. And I think that for this conversation, we'll end it on that note, but remind everyone to go get your free Peace and Harmony download at peaceandharmonydownload.com. So thank you so much, David. I really enjoy talking with you.
I always have a great time, Tami. Thank you so much for having me. And I suspect we'll talk again soon.
Yes, we will. And I'm pretty sure that the listeners are like, they can't wait to hear, what are they going to talk about next time? And so I'm really looking forward to that. So everyone, this is Tami Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.